Good morning, everybody. I'm John Self. Welcome to Career Live. We join you every Thursday morning with a short presentation to help you have more insight and do a better job managing your career. So thank you for joining us, and we hope that you will also consider joining our community. We are trying to build something, and this may or may not work, but we're trying. And that is a lot of people, they get help with their careers, outplacement, and the company pay for it, or you may write a check for it. And then after you get through 3 months or 4 months or whatever the contract says, you're on your own. Well, in your career community, you're never on your own. We're with you the whole way. It's a $49 a month membership. There are other services you can buy in the process, but you get them on discounts versus the going rate for career coaches. So we're delighted, absolutely delighted you're joining us today. And we want to start off today with our kind of theme presentation. You know, this week in my quotes that appear in the morning, in the afternoon, mornings, good morning, and in the afternoon, after hours, we've been focusing on employee entitlement and how that could be an extraordinarily good way to differentiate yourself, not only as an employer, but as an employee. And if you're competing for a job with a lot of other people, being able to differentiate your product, differentiate your brand is an important thing to consider. So today we want to talk about the secret link between being interviewed and interviewing. You know, that's a lot of people take that for, don't even think about it, to be perfectly honest. And I will tell you, for many years, I didn't either, until a very good client said, you know, John, I'm really struggling hiring the right people. And, you know, I thought, you know, he's struggling to tell his story too. And so he kind of identified a weakness by looking at other people. And so today we want to try to help you make that secret connection. We want to continue helping you become a better interviewer and help you be somebody who is excellent to be interviewed. So let's get started. Before I do, I forgot this, they didn't tie the little string around my finger. We will start later this week to distribute to our members a Networking 3.0 workbook, and it'll be available on Monday to your career community members on the website. You can download it. For community members, it's free. I believe they're talking about a price point on Amazon between $12 and $19. It is basically a workbook to help you get focused to do a better job at networking. If you don't network, if you don't build a relevant, aligned network that's strategically aligned with your career plan, you are going to have more and more trouble, face bigger mountains to climb in your job search. So we're here to help you do a better job. These books that we will be publishing periodically are designed for our members to give them additional resources. Non-members, they'll always be available on an ebook download on Amazon. So public sale begins next week, and the marketing powers that be will set the price. And so that would be the queen. So anyway, we want to let you know that that's coming down. Been working on it. We'll be doing some more work on it later today and tomorrow before we finally release it. So look for this in your email, or look for the alert in your email, and then download it, and then give us your feedback. Tell us what we can do to continue to support you in your job search or your career change. Okay, let's get back to our point, the secret link between being interviewed and interviewing. Do you know that 50 to 70% fail, new executives, new managers that are hired fail within 18 months? And let me even add some more terrible sort of context to that statement. This has been a number that's been researched since the mid-1990s by the Corporate Executive Board, and the numbers aren't changing that much. If anything, they're edging up. Why? When the cost of an executive fail in the hiring process is so expensive, why is this a problem? Why can't we fix it? Well, probably for the same reason that we're not fixing our turnover rate and we're not fixing our engagement rate, because nobody's focusing on it. Based on my 27 years in recruiting, I can tell you where part of the problem is. It's poor sourcing. People they're approaching this as a transaction. Oh, here's a candidate. Candidate A. Candidate A has everything we're looking for. Candidate A would be a good opportunity for this company. Let's really focus on candidate A. Well, candidate A may have all the paperwork necessary, but may have the personality of Attila the Hun. So you've got to spend time, invest time in improving your screening, because right now, a lot of the screening is just kind of perfunctory. It's not really a deep dive. And when you get the job, if you bust your tail to get the job, there's almost non-existent onboarding. What most people call onboarding is really employee orientation. And I think Bill Conity, who used to be at GE, or someone else once said that all employee orientation that's where you go learn how to get fired. Now, here are the more problems in the hiring process. First of all, the companies, you would think that if this is a job they've had around for a while, they would pretty much know what they're looking for. And sometimes they do. But more often than not, there's a lot of vague definition. So there's poor role definition and no consensus necessarily. Why? Well, sometimes HR doesn't ask anybody their opinion, including the hiring manager or the hiring manager's boss. There's inadequate applicant disclosure. In other words, when they present the job to an applicant, they leave out key things. I once got into a little bit of a discussion with a CFO at a public hospital in Fort Worth. We were looking for a chief information officer, and they had a lot of issues. And we talked about all those issues because those are going to be readily apparent to any new employee. And the CFO said, "You can't tell them this." And I said, "Why?" "Because it'll make people not want to come to work for us." And my response was, "Don't you think this is the least embarrassing time for them to know?" And I left it in. And the people who came in the door knew exactly what they were getting into. And the CIO that we recruited, I think, lasted 4 years. So, which was a major accomplishment in that very, very combative environment. There's a flaw in the recruiting process. We treat everything as transactional. Okay, you figure it out. Come to work for us. We're going to pay you well. Figure it out once you get here. Okay. Oh, you can't figure it out? Well, God, you must be deficient. Why don't we just get rid of you? We'll pay you a little severance package. Oh, I'm so sorry. Your career's now kind of upset because we had a crappy process. We did a bad job interviewing you, and you didn't ask a lot of questions, and you couldn't figure this out on your own. Okay. As I said earlier, it's a recruiting process is so flawed. It is so transactional. We're recruiting for the process. We're recruiting from time to hire, cost to hire, and we're not recruiting for the long-term outlook. Why? Because nobody's being held accountable for that. And we also believe that candidates have to figure it out themselves. Self-discovery is a bad option to include in your screening process. Now, if you say, well, what does this have to do about being interviewed as an applicant? But if you know what's going on in the process, you can be better prepared. You can be better prepared to really do a good job, and you can do a better job in preparing yourself if you know what to anticipate. If you know what some of the defects are, what some of the dysfunction is, you can ask questions in a very polite, tell me more approach to get a better handle. Is this a job you want to be involved in pursuing? Now, the U.S. Labor Department, they said the direct cost of a mishire, this is someone earning $80,000, which is kind of on the low end of the management rail in a lot of industries, is 30% of that amount of money. So it's a $24,000 hit to expense that they weren't planning. An executive level mishire is anywhere from 200% to 220% of the annual salary, according to CBS News. So if you have a CEO that's making $1.5 million, that's his base salary, 200% of that's going to be the overall cost. I'm going to share with you in just a minute some numbers that Brad Smart put together about what it costs to have turnover or mishire in sales. Now, one healthcare organization that I knew of and did work for, they had a turnover rate in the OR. And the expenses for this churn exceeded $800,000 a year, just in the OR. And when I told them, they said, well, that couldn't be right. And so we broke it down. How many people they have in the OR? What was the turnover rate? What was the average cost, national cost for replacing an OR nurse? And they're very difficult to find. And and you usually are going to have to pay a lot more than what you were paying before, and the numbers worked out. So people don't dive into the cost of making a mistake in hiring. And as a candidate, when you take a bad job and you get laid off within the first year or first 18 months, that looks terrible in your resume, and it costs you. It's going to cost you an expanded cycle for your next job search, and it may cost you in terms of what you can command as a CEO or whatever position you hold. So there's a cost on both sides of the equation, and people need to do a better job getting their hands around that and understanding that there's got to be accountability. Now, here is that slide, and I apologize if you get really close to your screen. I tried to get it bigger, but it was going to be blurry. Hiring costs for a salesperson making about $150,000. It was $23,500 on average. The compensation, as I said, averaged about $151,000. So maintenance, that's the process of maintaining the process and getting people in and out and taking care of those people, was about $14,000 per person. Severance averaged about $25,000. Now, opportunity cost lost, they calculated this and looked at it very, very carefully and came up that when you hire a salesman who's high production area, that salesman does not work out, the opportunity cost, the opportunities that you miss will cost your company around $250,000 or slightly higher. The disruption cost with overtime and other people having to cover areas outside their territory, about $100,000. So the total cost when you mishire on a $150,000 salesman was $563,000 so 563 and some change. You know why? That's a big number. It's a real number. And guess what? Most people don't want to talk about that number. Why? Because then that means somebody's going to have to be accountable for that number. And so most HR people don't want that. Most CEOs don't want that. Matter of fact, most organizations I know of don't even report their turnover numbers, either in financial reports or to their board. So bad recruiting and mishires, or if this is, people, you just say it's so easy to say. But when you've been in this business for 27 years and longer, mishires are more than just an operational inconvenience. Let me elaborate on that. For the company we've just identified, it's really, really expensive. That's money that you could put into product development, to marketing, to patient care, to hiring more employees, to giving raises, to participating and developing programs to help get your employees engaged. Engagement, by the way, as you may know, is averaging in the average company in the US across the board about 33%. That means that's the 33% level of productivity you can get, and you're paying for 100% of somebody's effort and passion and commitment, and you're getting about 33% of it. And, whose fault is that? Well, bad hiring. Here we are again, mishiring. But the other issue is you've got to motivate these people, and you've got to have a management team that's committed. And a lot of organizations, those numbers have been 33 to 40%. Gosh, back when I had brown hair. So this is craziness. Bad recruiting also, and when you're not honest with an employee, it has incredible ramifications. A guy I know was a very successful executive in North Carolina. He worked for a company. They wanted to move him up to his next size organization. He was going to get a nice big raise, but it was in a part of the country, Arizona, and she didn't really want to go. She was dug in pretty deep in her community. Her kids were happy in school. They were happy in their church. She was happy with her garden club and her women's coffee clutch each week. She really was comfortable. But this was a big role. The company was putting a lot of pressure on him. And so he agreed to look at it after he consulted with his wife. She reluctantly agreed with him. And they went to a city called Bullhorn, BS, Arizona. And the hospital that they wanted him to take over had kind of was doing very, very well, but they didn't pay attention to their doctors, who got mad and went across town with a competing company and built another hospital. And it sucked the patients out of this facility. And he looked at it. He said, okay, I've done this before. I can do this, but here are the conditions. I'm not going to just take this. My wife doesn't want to move, but I will take this on if you do a couple of things. Number one, this is a 3-year turnaround. I don't want any increase in my EBITDA for the first 2 years and only an 8%, 10% increase the third year. That's the condition. If you don't want to commit to that, I'm not coming. And they said, yes, we'll agree to that. We understand. Okay. No EBITDA increase for the first 2 years and a small increase the third year. And he said, I guarantee by the fourth and fifth year, I'll have you back in the 12 to 15% EBITDA growth. Okay. So they said, okay. And they said, you're going to have to do a better job. My wife's not going to want to pack. You're going to have to do all the packing. I don't care what it costs. You don't do that. We're not moving. Okay. We'll do that. So he took the job. It was a big increase in salary and a lot of tears, a lot of a gnashing of teeth. And they make the big move. It happens pretty much without any big issues. They find a nice home in this city with a little swimming pool. So the wife is thinking, okay, maybe I can make this thing work. He goes to work the first day. He goes in orientation, visiting with all of his managers, and he goes in for a meeting with the CFO. They're right in the middle of budgeting. The CFO shows him the information they've gotten from corporate on which they want the budget. It had 15% growth in EBITDA the first 3 years. And he said, this is wrong. They agreed not to do this. He said, this is what they gave me. So he gets on the phone, calls the guy who made the deal with, and he said, well, I got overruled. He said, when did you know that? He said, about a month ago. And he said, you didn't tell me? And he said, this is impossible. There's no way this is going to happen. Well, you'll make it happen or you won't be with us much longer. You won't be with us longer. I'm not going to be the guy that threw out on the curb. Obviously, you and the CFO will have to take that hit. Now, he has moved his family across country. He uprooted them from a beautiful home in a beautiful community where she had really great ties. She had parents were very well respected people, big ranching, farming interest in a family of some means. And so those were her roots. And she really was hoping to stay there. And now her husband has dragged her out in this godforsaken little town in, western Arizona. She has no friends. And now he is found out they lied to him. And he is so upset and she cannot believe it because she knew what his conditions were. And as the pressure mounted, as he continued trying to get those numbers changed or make them work, he got more and more pressure from his bosses to get those numbers up. You are failing. You are failing. And he struggled because it takes time to rebuild a medical staff. And it was so much pressure. He was so upset. His wife was so angry. She took the kids and moved back to the home that had not sold on the East Coast. He's living now in a house with a swimming pool with no family, minimal furniture, and he's getting his tail kicked every day at work. This is not the career move he wanted. This is not the deal he made. In the end, he got fired. In the end, he got divorced. His wife was so angry, she just couldn't move beyond it because she had warned him that this would happen. This company had a reputation for throwing people under the bus. If you want to know the truth, this company had a reputation for throwing too many people under the same bus. And the company kind of took pride in that. So it can destroy a family. It can absolutely destroy a family. So we really want you to, that's why this is so important. And that's why I spend so much time talking about asking questions. Okay, let's talk about steps. If you're maybe looking for a job, you may have a job, but when you get this next job, you're going to be part of the hiring process. You may be the hiring manager. You may be the CEO. The first thing you got to do before you do any search is update the job description. Now, I'm not talking about that gobbledygook that HR people write that's so technical and legal, but doesn't have any really meaningful information about how we're going to hold you accountable, and the nuances of the position. I hate AR templates that are that way. I know they're the legal documents. That's what you have to avoid any problems. But those aren't the ones you use for hiring. You use the hiring, that what we call the working job description or the job summary. So you want to think carefully about, what are we looking for? What is the selection criteria? It's not just master's degree and specific commitment or experience in these areas, these categories. It's not just your credentials. It's not just the years and types of experience. Those are all together important, but you really need to look very carefully beyond just those mere descriptions. Okay, what does that really mean? What are we really looking for? Tell me more. Tell me more. You want to specify previous accomplishments that are relevant with what your needs are. A lot of times everybody's assuming everything. The ideal candidate characteristics, including cultural match points. What the people who are successful here and really thrive, what are they like? Have you mapped them in terms of a personality match, a work habits match, a social and cultural match in the community? You need to do that if you haven't done it yet for your successful employees, because that's the template, if you will, that you're going to use to try to identify elements of a new person coming into the organization regarding the cultural match points. Throughout the process, you're focusing on the outcome, not the process. Now, a lot of times, people think, well, the process is we need somebody, we find somebody, we screen somebody, we hire somebody, we hope they work out. That's a terrible process. It's got to be more robust than that. And if you're the hiring manager and you don't have a robust hiring process and you're frustrated because you're making mishires or you're not hiring the right kind of people, it's because of your process and it's because of your questions. So you really now need to get together with your team and develop critical questions that will be included in the initial screening interview, and then develop additional questions for the in-depth follow-up interviews. A lot of times we just kick the ball to recruiters and say, okay, they can do the job. Well, some recruiters are extremely good. They're intuitive, they're insightful, they're diligent, and they listen very well, and they can pick up issues. But a lot of recruiters, I would probably hazard a guess to say the majority of recruiters are simply following a process. It's transactional. They've got to throw so many candidates through the process to look good, and they've got to worry about their time to hire and cost to hire. And there's very few meetings where people sit down and say, okay, we've got these candidates coming through, let's talk about them. Football teams just don't go out and play a game. Okay, we're all here, everybody got their uniform on, well, let's go out there and see what we can do. No, they've been planning for the game for weeks and weeks and weeks. They have meetings, they look at film. The average organization doesn't even come together as an interview team and talk about what we're doing and how we're doing it, what we really need to look for, and who's going to do on the day of the person comes in for an interview, who's going to ask what questions. Because you know what happens? A lot of times the candidate gets 12 of the same questions in an hour interview, and everybody else is assuming everybody else is asking the more important stuff. Well, that's so-and-so's role. He's the hiring manager. I'll let him do that. There's no coordination, and that's just craziness. And as I said, there's no game plan for successful recruiting in most organizations. Here's what you do. If you're bringing in someone at the management or executive level, and the number of people involved will depend on the rank in the organization, you look at the recruiter's screening notes. You look carefully at the resume. You mark it up. You never, ever interview a candidate when you haven't read the interview. And everybody's done it. Guilty as charged. But we just can't do that anymore. We have fewer number of slots to fill, and we need to go for the high-hanging fruit. You don't do that with a sloppy transactional process. Okay, you want to plan in advance. What are the key issues? What is this person's strengths and weaknesses appear? What are our match profile concerns? How are we going to get at that? What questions in the behavior and values inventory can we use to try to dig into this? Because a lot of times, you know what a resume is? It's a roadmap for an interview. Pre-interview briefing to bring the team together, poll for their concerns and from positives and the negatives. You want to stress the teamwork in this interview process, and you want to address joint accountability. Now, interviews are not inquisitions. I've done enough of them, over 9,000 over the years. And sometimes you just want to do it, but that's not the way you get to the nub of who the person is. This hope for the best is a common plan, and it's no plan at all. Somebody once said that hoping is a terrible career plan. Well, hoping to hire the best person is a terrible recruiting plan. It's not about your ego. And a lot of people make it is, well, I'm the CEO, so I don't really have to do it. Everybody else is going to really do hard work on this. And I'll just visit with a person and decide if I like working with them. Terrible. That's terrible. That's beyond arrogant. Okay. So if you're a CEO, please don't do that. Please, the cost, you can afford to be that way. Why? Because you're not looking at what it costs you. So I really implore you to be more intentional about your recruiting. You have to be intentional about your recruiting, because you need to ask the candidate, the applicant, the right questions. If you're not hitting them at the right points with the right questions, you're not going to really get to the nub of who they are. And you run a big risk of making a hiring mistake. And that costs you a lot of money, and that can train wreck their career. So be more responsive, be more compassionate, be more empathetic, and be more considerate. Now, when you're an applicant, this is an important thing to remember. You may come in it from the I want a job perspective, but you also have to think about, if you were doing the interview, what would you be looking for? And that's an important thing to consider. Now, the essence of the applicant, based on the resume, prior work experience, accomplishments, think of questions that will allow you to dig in. Interesting, tell me more questions, and use a blend of core and categorical questions to get to that point. The core questions are going to really help you zero in on their style, their attitude, that ego. How do they make decisions? How do they interact with people? Do they have empathy? Or is it all about them, command and control? And the core questions, you can get to that pretty quickly. Categorical questions are, we have a department that's running really high overhead or high turnover rate. What have you done in the past to reduce your turnover rate? What was it before you started? What is it today? Those are categorical questions. What was your free cash flow per month? That's a categorical question. Metrics that will help you understand, did this person do a really good job in performing their duties? Did they hit their numbers? You want to really dig into that. Ask questions. How are you held accountable? What are the specific metrics how did you do on those metrics? These are questions you've got to ask, and usually are not, because we've said, oh, but the behavior and values questions will help us and give us everything we need to know. No, it won't. No, it won't. I started off and I was all in on the behavior and values questions. But the process I used, called top grading from Brad Smart, also focused on what did you do and how did you do it? And those are important questions. If you are interviewing, those are questions you should be asking. If you're being interviewed, those are questions you better be prepared to answer going forward. The old line, carpe diem, seize the moment. We are at an inflection point, something that politicians like to say and use, but we really are. We are going to go through a very tumultuous year in our selection of our next president. We could have all manner of ramifications on the other side. Who knows? Nobody knows. I don't know, and I'm not making any projections. But I think right now what you can use is this period of time to really strengthen your recruiting. As a candidate, you need to improve your interviewing skills. We can help you do that. As an organization, you need to do a better job and hold your recruiting team accountable for cutting down the turnover rate. And as the CEO, you need to be monitoring that. And you need to pay attention to the turnover rate and the engagement rates. And they're both terrible numbers, and they both are costing you hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars each year. Now, my context here is, keep in mind, most people, even the people that are in our membership group and that I coach, they do not think about their story. Most people are busy thinking about, well, I'm successful and I'm really been good and people will like me and want to hire me. They don't think of ways throughout the day, how can I sell myself? If they're actively looking for a job, They don't think about that question at all, even though I really push them to practice answering the value brand statement every day. And you know what happens when they go to an interview? They may do a good job. They may not flub anything. They may not make a misstatement. They may not use and and wow, all those things too much. They may be really confident. Hey, I really did a good job. Yet they're leaving so much value on the table. What does that mean? It means because they haven't sold their value, because they haven't connected their value to the needs of the client, because they haven't reassured that client, I can do this job and I can do it in a way that will promote engagement, reduce turnover, all those issues that are possible problems surrounding this position. They see no value in talking about their own journey. This is you. You should be excited about it. Now, you don't want to be arrogant. You don't want to talk too much. Guilty as charged again, but it's something that you absolutely want to do. Interviews should not compound that sin. The interviewer should not compound that sin by not thinking about questions they would ask if they were being interviewed. So flip the roles back and forth and try to get this into a little bit more of a three-dimensional perspective. Again, want to remind you, first of all, I hope that information was helpful. Then I want to remind you about our new book coming out. It's free to our members. You'll get a link when it's available, and I hope it's beneficial. Please give us feedback. We want to know what we can do to continue to help you. We want to know what we can do to make your career journey more enjoyable and something that's that is really kind of a burning fire in your life, that you've got this career movement forward. You love what you do. You love what you're trying to do. And that really helps propel your life into a balanced workplace environment. So we hope that you will take that opportunity to look at this workbook when it comes out. I think it'll be helpful if you see areas where we can make improvements. That's fine. This whole motion of networking, finding a job, recruiting processes, interviewing questions, interviewing styles, LinkedIn profile. These things are all changing so fast. Some of the changes are legitimate. Some of the changes are, just sort of marketing packages that people are putting together to get you to spend $1,000 a month on a LinkedIn profile. That's fine, whatever you want to do. But, just the basic and core material is changing. The basic expectations are changing. You cannot do what you've done in the past and hope to succeed. So I hope that you'll take care. Join us tomorrow at 11:30. I think it's 11:30 for Your Career Questions. We've got some good ones already been submitted, so I think you'll find it a good investment of 30 minutes. And we also want to remind you that we have our boot camp the last week in April, Saturday morning. It's 3 hours. We've got 2 speakers that have committed. Ron Thomas, who is a HR consultant, a remarkable guy with a remarkable journey through the corporate ranks in the East Coast, including a time as Martha Stewart's CHRO. And he is now a big healthcare consultant for the Middle East and North Africa and Southeast Asia. So he's a really bright, innovative guy. The other person is going to be T.D. Smyers, who is a coach who specializes. You've got the job. Now we're going to help you transition. Here are things that you need to be listening for as you make that transition. So we hope you'll join us for our career boot camp at the end of April.